Good evening. It's about time for us to get started tonight. Good evening. Can everybody hear me? It's about time to get started tonight. If you would like to mark your song of invitation, will be 912. 912 will be our song after our devotional. 912. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. And then before our Devo, we will sing 613, 613, 612, 612. His yoke is easy. 612. I found my Lord, and He is mine. He won me by His love. I'll serve Him all my years of time, and dwell with Him above. His yoke is easy, His burden is light. I found it so, I found it so. His service is my sweetest delight. His blessings ever flow. No other for the price I know. I walk with Him alone. His streams of love forever flow. Within my heart is strong. His yoke is easy, His burden is light. I found it so, I found it so. His service is my sweetest delight. His blessings ever flow. I've tried the road of sin and found His cross makes all easy. My fruits of joy and joys of love, more than I could believe. His yoke is easy, His burden is light. I found it so, I found it so. His service is my sweetest delight. His blessings ever flow.
I'm going to read from a passage in James chapter 2. James chapter 2, verses 18 and following. And talk about somebody has to go first. Now, the people that were at the Green Oak service this afternoon, they went first, and they've already heard this thought, so I don't want them to give it away, but somebody has to go first. James chapter 2, verse 18, it says, "Some will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works. I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well, but even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Wasn't Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? Faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God." Sometimes you got to be willing to take a risk. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody talk before about the wolf peach. Ever had the chance to see a wolf peach in person or not? But the wolf peach was introduced to Europe during the exploration years of the 1400s. You know, when all the sailors and explorers were going out to different parts of the world, Magellan and Columbus and Cortez and all these other people. And somebody brought back to Europe this plant that they'd found called the wolf peach. It wasn't long before the wolf peach had gained a pretty bad reputation. It was said to be one of the ingredients that witches used in an ointment that they would rub on their brooms, and it would help their brooms fly across the sky. It was also said to be one of the things necessary to make the potion that could transform you into a werewolf. That's why they called it the wolf peach, because it could turn you into a werewolf. It was a part of the family. It's related to in botany, it's related to something called henbane, the same plant family. And the Pope's physician of the time said that henbane and anything connected to it were ingredients in witches' brews and things that witches would use. It was known by the early Romans. There was a historian and a botanist who talked about this thing, and he called it a poisonous plant from Egypt. But it eventually made its way to the colonies of America. And in the colonies, it was called corrupt, rank, and stinking. All the way back in 1850, this is actually pretty far, Roman historian, all the way up to 1850, there was a Harvard doctor who, his name was D.O. Lewis, and he claimed that the wolf peach caused bleeding gums and hemorrhoids. Good stuff, right? So if you know all of that about the wolf peach, and then you're at this group, this gathering in Salem, New Jersey, there's a man who stands up in front of us. The man stands up, Colonel Robert Johnson, and he has a basket of these things. He has a basket of wolf peaches, and he eats the whole basket in front of everybody. It was like a circus sideshow, freak, this feat of unbelievable strength. Why would anybody want to touch those things? We still have issues with the wolf peach today. We can't classify it vegetable or fruit. The Supreme Court had to weigh in on the discussion. NASA sent some seeds on one of their shuttle missions up to the International Space Station to see what would happen with these seeds in outer space. And if I had one, if I could get a hold of one here and bring it up, and I were to ask who would dare take a bite like Robert Johnson did all those years ago, I don't know how many of us with that information would be so quick to jump on board. And yet, you can get a hold of one of these things today. You've got to call it by a different name. But if you go to Walmart and ask for one, they will give you a tomato. That's what it is. The wolf peach is just a common tomato. But for years and years and years, it was seen as this horrible, dangerous thing. But somebody had to take the risk and go first, didn't they? Somebody had to stand up and say, I'm going to do something that other people think is too risky or not willing to do. Kind of like Abraham, when he put his faith to the test. When God said, get up and go, and Abraham got up and went. Or how about Moses being drawn to the shores of the Red Sea? And nobody'd seen water part before, and so everybody else there was certain that their destruction was soon to follow. And yet Moses took a risk and did something that no one else was willing to do. How about that queen, Esther, who went into the king's throne room uninvited? And to do so at that time period meant if you didn't get an invitation and you went to the king's presence uninvited, it could mean your life. And yet she dared. She took the risk. What about Peter? When Jesus said, come on, step out of the boat. None of the other 12 apostles, none of the other 11 apostles were willing to follow Peter. Peter was the only one who took the risk. Why? Because of their faith, because of the trust that they had in God. It changed the way that they acted. It influenced, it affected what they did. And because of that, because of being daring, because of being willing to take the risk, because of willing to go first, they were able to do great things that we know about even today. I wonder what great things might be awaiting you this week. What opportunities does God have in store for you to take advantage of if you will seek them out, if you're willing to go first? Tonight, if you need the strength to do that, or if you've missed those opportunities and you want to do something about that, or if there's anything that we can help you with, I'd encourage you to come forward now as we stand together and as we sing our invitation song.
Good to see everybody tonight. We appreciate you being here. If you're visiting with us, we are always glad that you're here. If you're looking for a church home, we'd love for you to come and work and worship with us. Again, we want to welcome those that have placed membership with us in the last month: Jason, Jana, Kaylee, and Caden. Also, Tim and Karen Barrett and Marilyn Crowell. And we welcome Austin and Bailey and Dean and Clyde to our family. But we thank you, and if you are visiting, thank you for being here. We look forward to Brother Arvey's lesson tonight as he continues on the world religions. If you're here and haven't had the opportunity to partake for the Lord's Supper, it is prepared for you. If you go through the door to my right at this time, someone will be there to serve you. I know Eric mentioned this morning, thanking all those that helped with breakfast with Santa. Thank you again. Thank you all that helped with the ornament making yesterday afternoon. All those that went to Green Oaks today. We've got a lot of things going on. We appreciate all that are involved. Ladies' Christmas party is next Saturday at Donya Scott's home from 5:30 to 8. Please sign the list over to my left if you're coming, or if you have any questions, see Donya. There will not be an ornament exchange this year. You're going to be taking up gift cards for a struggling family with 2 teens. If you have any questions, see Donya. Jim, do you need more funds for the fruit baskets? Okay, if you can help with that. Okay. If you can help with that, see Jim or Lori. He'll be picking that fruit up Friday. They'll be putting those together next Sunday morning at 1 o'clock. Then we'll be delivering those afterwards. Gifts for Green Oaks are due next Sunday. And then we'll be having the holiday cheer on the 12th, on that Tuesday. Also on Monday, the 11th, there's going to be a group going to Green Oaks to do some Christmas caroling for the residents there at 5 o'clock. If you have any questions on that, please see Angela Lass or Sherry McKee. We appreciate them putting that together. Elders Deacons meeting. 2 weeks from today, December the 17th at 3:30. Please try to be here. Deacons, if at all possible. We need to have a meeting before the end of the year, especially if you've got anything to go in the budget. We need to work on that. So please be here on the 17th, 2 weeks from today. Please continue to remember Sue Beal, Joe Cooper, Dwayne Fulmer, Jimmy Martz will be having surgery in Nashville on Thursday. Philip Murphy having surgery in Birmingham tomorrow. Want to continue to remember Mary McCluskey, Marjorie Rivera, Dan Simpson, Dolores Thornton, and all the others that we have listed in our list. We do congratulate again Mallory and Mac Trolliner over the birth of their little one. So be sure and send her a note or get with her on Facebook. That's all I have. We'll be dismissed at this time. All of you younger ones that are going to your classes.
We continue our discussion on world religions and trying to at least have an overview of some of the religions and the faith that we encounter every day around us so that we don't have a fear or an apprehension about engaging people in conversation. And so tonight we're going to talk about Buddhism. Probably not, knowing me. That on, yeah, that's that. What is that O-N again? That green button. There we go. Okay, y'all know me in technology. Probably no other region in the world can make the claims of northern India. Because northern India, not the country of India itself, but the northern part of India, is the birthplace of Hinduism, that we talked about last week, of Jainism and Sikhism, which Lord willing we'll talk about in next week, and also Buddhism. And Buddhism is the fourth largest religion in the world. In 2010, there were 488 million adherents or followers. That number today is said to be around 470 million. So they're going down. Their numbers are going down. The projections all the way out to 2050, they will continue to reduce in number. And I think it's important for us as we think about Christianity and those not just in the Western world but worldwide, fewer and fewer people are saying they are followers of Christ, and that's disturbing to us, as it should be. But other religions are following the same suit. And what's growing is the category of nones. People who they say, well, I'm not saying I'm an atheist, I'm not saying I'm agnostic, I'm just not anything. And so as that number grows, Christianity is impacted, but other faith systems are as well. And so it's fourth largest in the world. It's the first to be thought of as universal. And what we mean by that is the first that was not defined by a geographic parameters, by one ethnicity, one language, or one culture. It has been the dominant religion for 2,000 years in the Far East. And Buddhism, like every group that we look at, is not seamless. And if time permits, I hope at the end we'll look at several of the different groups and sects, subsects of Buddhism. All right, the central thought of Buddhism is that our salvation from suffering lies only in our own efforts. So as we talk about Buddhism, which is much more creedal than Hinduism, we talk about this path and this way, and you'll notice that it's very focused on our salvation from suffering lies in our own efforts. And so Buddhists see suffering in everything. They see suffering all around us. And their understanding is that if we can figure out how we create suffering for ourselves, then we can solve that problem and become free from it. So tragically, Buddhism is a very pessimistic faith system. Very pessimistic, very negative. And of course, it is a works-based salvation system. Much of what we know about Buddha, we don't really know how reliable it is. He wrote nothing during his time. It was hundreds of years later after his death before people even began to write down his teachings. And so what we have today, we don't really know. And so what I'll present to you is what Buddhists believe about him and his life and what he taught. He was not interested in history. He didn't want to talk about where the earth came from. He did not claim to be a messenger from God. He did not claim to have a revelation from on high. Buddha basically said, I found something that works for me. You give it a shot. If it works for you, great. And if it doesn't work for you, well then you go off and you try to find you something else that works. That's a quick summation, but that's about right for what Buddhism is. All right, so his writings come down, his traditions come down in two versions. The Pali Canon is the first one. It's 11 times larger than the Bible itself. It's the oldest of the two books of writings that they have. The oldest autograph that we have is from the 1st century, and it's deemed more accurate because it's older, and it's believed by Buddhists that it gives a better understanding, at least, of primitive Buddhism. But it's very very complicated in its teaching. Then we have the Tripitaka. The Tripitaka, the three baskets of teachings. The first one is the Vinaya, or the disciple teachings. And it's a collection of writings about rules and regulations for strict adherence to Buddhist life. And it is very, very detailed. One part of it has 227 rules for self-examination when you are fasting. Now that's how detailed some of this is. The second one, the Sutta, or the discourses, that's the main authority for teaching of Buddha, and it deals with 10,000 plus supposed teachings of Buddha and things that he said. And then the third group, the doctrinal elaborations, Abhidhamma. It's very metaphysical, talks a lot of philosophical, very hard to understand. Even Buddhists, they say it's holy, but then they don't really adhere to it that much because they can't really understand it themselves. Another one of the sacred writings for them are the Jataka, or the birth tales. And this is important for Buddhists because it tells of the 550 previous births of Buddha. It also tells the story of his immaculate conception when a white elephant took a lotus flower and took that to his mother, and she became pregnant through that process. And so they believe that Buddha himself was born through an immaculate conception, at least in theory, but then they have a history, as we're about to see, that contradicts that. So, there's a lot of inconsistency in Buddhism, there's a lot of contradiction, and it can be, and truthfully is, very, very confusing. Buddha is not a name, but a title. And the title Buddha means enlightened or awakened one. But there was a real person who was the Buddha. His name is Siddhartha Gautama. And again, what we know about him a lot is legend, because it was hundreds of years after his death that things began to be written down. But I will give you the narrative that the Buddhists believe. They believe that he was born somewhere around 562, 563 BC, and that he died around 483 BC. So he was born about a generation before the time that Judah was carried into Babylonian captivity, and he died a generation before Ezra led the Jews back to Jerusalem. The legend of his life is a very interesting one. They say that he was born to a very wealthy family. His father was, some stories have him as a king. He really was a chieftain. He was kind of a leader of a clan, but he was wealthy. And when he was born, you remember last time when we talked about Hinduism, they really were into astrology. They still are. Well, Buddhism comes out of Hinduism, and so his father would have been Hindu in a lot of his practices. So he brought in a holy man, a wise man, probably an astrologer, at his birth. And the astrologer looks at the stars and looks at the time that he was born, and he makes a prediction about this baby. Now, the father has brought him in and is paying him, so you know it's going to be a good prediction, right? So he says, well, he has a twofold destiny. If he stays at home, he will be a great king. But if he leaves home, he will be the Savior of his people and Savior of all mankind. Now, the father wanted him to stay home. And so he did everything he could to keep him at home. Buddha's mother dies when he is just 7 days old. And the grief from that, plus the father having this wise man's prophecy in the back of his head, he goes completely overboard to keep his son at home. And so he allows nothing negative to come into his life. He will not let his son see anything bad. So he does not allow anybody who's sick to be around his son. He doesn't allow people who are aging to be around his son because he doesn't want his son to know that people age. He doesn't let him experience anything and understanding about death. He knows nothing about suffering or misery. His life is contained there within the walls, the structure and compound of the palace. And it is a spoiled life. Now, Buddhists believe that very early on that he began to think something's missing. Something's not right in this. And I think there's more to this. When he's 16 years of age, he marries his cousin. That's how they did things back then. He marries his cousin, and then at the age of 26, he has a son. Finally has a child at 26. And his son's name in Sanskrit, it's irrelevant, but it means one who binds you down. Now, how'd you like to have a name that meant that? What do you think he was already saying about this child? He's going to cause me grief. He's going to keep me here and keep me from going out and doing what I want to do. And so finally, at the age of 29, he tells his father, I'm going outside the palace walls. I think I'm missing something. I'm going to go out and I'm going to experience life in the nearby village. Well, the father freaks out because the son's going to find out the truth. And so he's the chieftain, he's the leader of the clan. He sends out word to the city and he says, sweep the streets, get all the sick people out of here, tell all the old people to stay indoors, put up banners. I want everything to look good so that when my son comes out and goes through the city, he will see that life in the city is exactly like it is in the palace and that I've not been hiding anything from him. Well, everybody didn't get the memo, okay? That's the Zip City way of saying what happened, I guess, okay? And so what happens is, as he goes out, now there's two different ways that Buddhists tell this story. One is that all four of these encounters took place in one day. Some Buddhists believe that there were 4 days in succession. There was one encounter per day. That's really irrelevant. But he goes out, and the first thing he does is he encounters someone who is old. And he don't know what this is. He's never seen anybody age before. And if you try to read and research, because the logical question is, well, how did he live all those years and people not age around him? Apparently the father did something, either some believe with makeup and things that try to help people not appear to age, or some believe that when a person reached a certain age, they just kind of retired and disappeared. They weren't around the sun anymore. Because he didn't want him to understand that people aged. And so he encounters an old man. And he finds out that if you live long enough, your body starts to break down. The second person that he encounters is someone who is sick. Laying on the side of the road, they are in pain, they are in misery, they're hurting, they're moaning, and he's never seen a sick person before. And this shocks him. And then he runs into a funeral procession. Hindus, so they're taking the body outside of town to burn the body, as Hindus do, to cremate that body, and he didn't realize people die. And then finally, he encounters a holy man, a poor monk, begging for food. And he sees peace and tranquility on his face, and he realizes there's something to life that I'm missing. Now, for the Buddhists, they call this the old man, sick man, dead man, and holy man. That's how they remember these events that take place. And so he immediately goes back home to his father and he tells him, You've been sheltering me, you've been hiding things from me. I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to find what life is all about. Now, the Buddhists call this the Great Renunciation. the great renunciation, because he is renouncing his father and wealth and all these things. Now think back to the prophecy. Prophecy was, if he stays here, he'll be a leader of his people. If he leaves home, he'll be the Savior of all mankind. And so the father believes that this is about to take place. He goes out and he finds two Brahmins. Now let's see who remembers from last time. What's a Brahmin? A priest, a holy man. He finds two, he attaches himself to them, but they don't really help him understand much. And so he and 5 friends decide they're going to live the ascetic lifestyle. They move into a cave and live in that cave for a number of years outside of town. Now the legend that the Buddhists tell is that those 6 individuals lived on 1 grain of rice a day for years and became nothing but skeletons. And after that time, Siddhartha still had not found what he was looking for. And so he comes to a point where he says, I really don't know what to do. And that's when he goes and sits under a tree. The Buddhists today call this the Bodhi tree, B-O-D-H-I. Oh, it's there, okay. The Bodhi tree, which just means tree of enlightenment. And he's sitting under this tree and he has this great revelation. And it takes several weeks for the full effect of this revelation to come to him. But what is it that he finally realizes? He finally realizes that life is about choosing the middle path. If you think about it, he had been to both extremes. He said, I lived a life of opulence, of wealth. I had everything. I lived a privileged life. And that didn't bring me happiness. And then I went with my friends and we lived in a cave and we lived on a grain of rice a day for years. And that didn't bring it to me. So happiness is found in pursuing the middle path. And in this deep state of meditation, he reaches nirvana, which the Buddhists believe is the highest degree of God consciousness. And he learned in this revelation about suffering. He learned that suffering is a necessary part of life. The sooner that we accept that, the better. And he learned that you can escape pain and suffering through meditation. And he also then began to preach this. He taught that you choose the middle path, you choose meditation, you accept suffering, you try to free yourself from suffering, and you can reach nirvana. And he began to travel all over India, that region. Now the rainy months are July, August, and September, so he would go back home, live with his wife and his child in July, August, and September. The rest of the time he would travel. He would go into a village and he would teach out in the open during the morning. He would meditate in the afternoon. He would wait for a family to invite him to their home to stay the night. He would teach in their home for the night. He would spend the night with them. He would get up the next day and he would repeat that process over and over again. And so for the next 45 years of his life, he was 35 when he sat under the Bodhi tree. So for the next 45 years, he did this until the age of 80. There's a legend that a blacksmith was jealous of him and fed him bad pork and poisonous mushrooms, and that he died of food poisoning. On his deathbed, he told his followers, "You go and be lamps to yourselves." Now think about that in contrast to what Christ told us in connection to that. What did he tell us about being lights? We're to be lights to the world. We're to be lights to others. But Buddha said, you be lamps to yourselves. And so it's a very self-centered, self-focused, pessimistic, self-salvation, works-based faith system. His body was then cremated and sent all over, and there are temples all over that celebrate his life. So let's look specifically at some of the teachings. There are the Four Noble Truths. The truth of Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. The first one is dukkha. It's the truth of suffering. And that's the belief that suffering is everywhere. Suffering is a part of life. It's everywhere we go. Life is painful. Birth is painful. Death is painful. And in between, we have sicknesses. We have disease. It's all painful. So life is full of pain. That's the first noble truth. The second noble truth is called Tanha, T-A-N-H-A. And it is cravings. And what Buddha taught was the cause or the source of our suffering is our own cravings. Our own lust, our own desires, our own coveting things, wanting things. The third noble truth is that there is a way to cease the suffering. So if our desires cause the pain and suffering, what's the way to cease suffering? We've got to cut out our desires. And so that was Buddha's truth. He said, if you can just convince yourself to give up all your desires, you will no longer experience pain. And then the fourth element is that there is a path to follow. And that path, again, the middle path, is the eightfold path. And here are the elements of the eightfold path: right understanding, which is just having the right attitude, accepting the Four Noble Truths. I always think about, and I mean no disrespect in this, but this is the way my mind works. I always think about Barney when I teach this. And y'all remember Barney when the guys were there in the cells, and Barney told them, here at the Rock we have 2 rules. Right. What was rule number 1? Okay. Yeah. Well, rule 2 was no writing on the walls, because writing on the walls is hard to get off the walls. Rule number 1 was obey all the rules. Okay? So, and again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but we'll talk about some of the inconsistencies here because, well, let's just go ahead and do that. One of the things that Buddha says is the way to end suffering is to cease desires. But one of the things that Buddha teaches is to do that, you must desire to follow the Eightfold Path. Now, is that a contradiction? Yes. If you cease all desires, then how can you have the desire, the want to follow this path? And so there is that contradiction. So right understanding, right thoughts, and we should have pure thoughts, not impure thoughts. And again, you know, some of this is good stuff. I mean, we wouldn't disagree with some of it. The third one is right speech. Buddhists believe in simple, uncomplicated speech, always being truthful. Number 4 is right action. That's charity, no killing, no stealing, always helping people. Number 5, Buddhists believe in the right mode of living and livelihood. So you choose a career that is going to help other people. A Buddhist that's following pure Buddhism cannot have a career that's harmful to other people, that's harmful to the environment, that's harmful to citizens and the world as a whole. Number 6 is the right effort. And again, that's avoiding evil, overcoming evil. Number 7, right awareness. And that's where you kind of get into the meditation, contemplating, mindfulness, and the right meditation, the 8th one. Part of that is they believe in focusing. You train yourself by meditating and you focus on one object. And you focus on that one object and you train your mind to get to the point where you can focus on that one object and everything else just vanishes away. And so that's how you learn to get to that point. So in Buddhism, there's really no worship. There's no mention of God. There is no Savior. It is a religion, but some of the pure elements of religion, the elements are missing. And it is, again, self-salvation at its core. All right, the 4 coronary truths, they're also part of this. The first one is karma. Buddhists believe that karma is alive, well, and active in everything. Now, what's karma? Somebody define karma for us. You reap what you sow. That's a simple way to put it. Right, you reap what you sow. And so Buddhists believe that if you have a flat tire, or if you stump your toe, or if you have something happen, well, that's karma coming back around because you've done something to deserve that. So they really emphasize the moral law of causation. They believe in rebirth. Now, most Buddhists do not believe in transmigration of the soul. Now let's see who remembers from last week what's transmigration of the soul. They believe in reincarnation, but not transmigration of the soul. Larry? Okay. All right. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, the soul does not die. It transfers. The body dies, but that soul transfers from that body to a new body, transmigration of the soul. Most Buddhists, and we'll hopefully talk about an exception to that, they believe in a literal rebirth, a new soul. Now, then you get into, okay, how do you know it's reincarnation? Well, you get a lot of different opinions. And some Buddhists say, well, you might have some recollection of a previous life, that deja vu. You might have that, and there are different schools of thought on that, whether or not you remember your last life or not. Anarcha, they believe that everything is uncertain and changing, and we just have to accept that. That's some people call it impermanence. Is one of their things, and then the fourth one is nirvana. And nirvana, again, is what you want to reach. That's what you want to achieve. That's the highest level of God consciousness. That's where you have trained your mind and you have ceased all your desires and you have gotten to the point where you don't think about anything else but what you want your mind to think of. And you say, okay, well then what is that? Is that heaven? No. It's a state of release. It's a state. Larry? Okay, that's right. That's their goal. And it's a state or condition where all the cravings are gone. You don't have any worries. Karma is no longer effective on you. It's no longer active. And so you just kind of pass into nothingness. That begs the question, is a Buddhist atheist? Agnostic? They don't really want to talk about that. They just say, Buddha found a way that worked for him. We're trying to follow that and do the same thing. Just one side note before we get into the different sects and divisions. In Buddhism, at least in the early stages of Buddhism, only men could reach nirvana. And for many Orthodox Buddhists today, they still believe this. They say that women, you got a shot, but guess who you got to go through in your family to have a shot at reaching nirvana? The husband. So it's all about the husband. Sorry, ladies, but that's so that's an opportunity though for us. If you encounter a lady who is Buddhist, ladies especially, that's a great opportunity for you to say, I believe in a way that I can have a relationship. And yes, my husband's important, but I can have that relationship outside of my husband. And my salvation is not based on any other human being. It's based on my relationship with Christ. And I think that's a great opportunity and a great way to begin a conversation. So let's talk now about the different divisions of Buddhism. And there are a lot, but we'll try to hit the big ones. The first one we'll mention is Theravada Buddhism. This is called the little vehicle or the narrow way. And, we talked about with Islam, much of the division in Islam is based on, let's see who remembers. What caused a lot of the division in Islam? You remember? Let me help you a little bit. Do what? Yeah, it's about the leader. Did Muhammad appoint a successor? If he did, how many successors did he appoint? Okay? Well, Islam's not the only one that's split over that. So, Buddhism, a lot of the sects have to do with whether or not there was somebody who came after Buddha. And if not, then what direction do we go and who is that? So Theravada Buddhism, the little vehicle or the narrow way, they had a conference in India after his death, and they said, well, we think that Buddha wanted us to go in this direction. And there were fewer people who went with this group at that time. That's why it's called the narrow, or the narrow way, or the little vehicle. And so the monks in Theravada Buddhism, if you see monks like this, and they are in these, what is that, an orange, I guess, robe, those are typically Theravada Buddhists. When you talk about Buddhism and the different divisions of it, you have to talk about Ashoka. Ashoka was a king in India, and this is when Buddhism was at its greatest. His kingdom reached from the west, modern-day Afghanistan, to the east, past modern-day India, to the north into China. It was a vast, vast kingdom. And he fought in a battle, the Battle of Kamala, I think that's right, where he brought 600,000 men. And he fought a force of about 150, 200,000 men. And there were 250,000 both sides that were killed. And the story is that Ashoka, and by the way, he's 3rd century BC, he was the king. He stands out and he looks out over this battlefield after the battle is over with. And he sees all of these thousands and thousands of dead bodies. And he thought to himself, I'm not following what Buddha taught. And so he became a hardline Buddhist from that point forward. He was still king, but he also became a Buddhist monk. And he did lots of things that still we are impacted by today. All humans are one family became the central focus of his government. And he began to deal with enemies differently and neighboring empires differently. He believed that everything alive was connected to the divine. And so he began to write laws, animal rights laws. He was the first king ever to write laws that protected animals. And so India has on their books the oldest animal rights laws there are because of King Ashoka. They also have the oldest animal hospitals and veterinary schools because of him. And he helped then to expand and spread Buddhism to other areas. So when we talk about the impact, it's been a dominant religion in the Far East for 2,000 years. Part of it is because of King Ashoka. Then you have Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is the greater vehicle or the broader way, and it was not just for monks. They had rules that applied to everyone. And Mahayana Buddhism is the one that spread to Japan and to China, Vietnam, Nepal, a lot of the places that you see there. And then Zen Buddhism. Has anybody ever heard of Zen Buddhism? Okay, if you have, what is it connected to here in America? Okay, yoga. Okay, martial arts. That's what I was thinking about, the martial arts. And Zen Buddhism really comes from Japan. It's a mixture of Buddhism and Shintoism, which hopefully in 2 weeks we'll talk about the Shinto faith a little bit. And you see Master Zen is the one who took Buddhism when it came there and kind of integrated it with some of their religion there, their ethnic religion, and then it began to spread. It became very popular in the West. Chinese Taoism is also part of that. Then you have Pure Land Buddhism. This is a smaller sect, but it's fascinating because they believe that there are 9 levels of existence, and the 9th and the highest is the Pure Land, somewhat equivalent to what we say as heaven. And they say there are different ways to enter into the Pure Land, and they actually believe that the lowest form of that is a deathbed confession. And so someone can be non-practicing all of their life, and then on their deathbed say that I wish to follow the teachings of Buddha, and they believe that that is enough to get you in to the ninth level. Now, all of these subsets, probably a couple of you have heard of Zen Buddhism. Most of you have not heard of most of them. This last one you have. And it's probably the one that you think about when you think about Buddhism today, because they've got the best PR campaign. And that is Tibetan Buddhism and the Dalai Lama. Who is the actor that promotes Tibetan Buddhism? Because he's an adherent to it, and he's friends with the Dalai Lama. Richard Gere. He is probably the most famous, besides the Dalai Lama, and certainly in the West, Richard Gere is the most well-known Tibetan Buddhist. Tibet is a country to the north of India, between India and China. And in the 7th century, the king there sent messengers south, 7th century AD, into India to bring back teachings of this Buddhism he had heard about. And the story is that all of them except one died on the journey, because it was a very dangerous journey. But he came back, he brought it back, taught it to the king, and the king said, "This will be our religion," and he forced everyone to convert. Has anybody in here seen the movie 7 Years in Tibet? Brad Pitt. If you haven't, it's an interesting movie, and it actually tells the story. It's based on fact, and it tells the story. Brad Pitt's character is a mountain climber who gets caught up in World War II, and he and his buddy end up sneaking into Tibet to try to save their lives and get out of a camp. And he becomes the tutor for the new Dalai Lama, who is the current Dalai Lama that's still alive. And it's really fascinating. And at the end of that, towards the end, it talks about the Chinese coming in and how things are changing. And so China invaded Tibet in 1951. And this Dalai Lama, he was still young. He had to escape over the mountains into India and has lived in exile ever since 1959. When they left Tibet, there were 6,000 monasteries in Tibet. The last time that anyone was allowed to go into China to count, there were only 12 left. Dalai means ocean, and Lama means teacher. And so the title, Dalai Lama, just means one whose wisdom is as vast as the ocean. The first Dalai Lama was born in 1341, and this is the current 14th Dalai Lama. Now, I mentioned earlier that they do not believe in transmigration of the soul. They believe in reincarnation, but they believe the soul is reborn in the next person, and maybe some element of that's carried forward, but they don't know. In Tibetan Buddhism, they believe that the Dalai Lama's soul carries forward. And so what they believe is that each of the 14 Dalai Lamas, up to this one, same person. So, you have a Dalai Lama, that Dalai Lama dies. How long do they have to wait for the next Dalai Lama to be born? What's the minimum they got to wait? Don't overthink it. Well, now, for them to be born, 9 months, okay? So, what they do is they have astrologers, and they wait for the astrologers to tell them, okay, the time is right, and we want you to go out. And that period of time can be anywhere from 9 months up to several years. Let's see, the 13th Dalai Lama died in 1933. The current Dalai Lama was born in 1935. It wasn't 2 full years, so it was about a year and something. All right? So the astrologers tell them, this is the date. You're looking for a child that was born at this time. And then they send couriers out into all the countryside in India to look, and they ask, okay, was a child born in this time frame and something unique happened at his birth? So some of the tales that they tell are that, there was an eclipse while the mother was in labor. Or one story is that a white owl came and landed on the fence post outside the house while the mother was in labor. And as soon as the child was born and was okay, the white owl flew away, never to be seen again. And that's an area that doesn't have white owls. So they look for things like that. Then what they do is they take items to go in to visit with this baby. They wait for the baby to get old enough till they can grasp things, hold things, reach for things. And they lay out in front of them several items. Some of those items, they are brand new. And some of those items belong to the last Dalai Lama. And what they're looking for is for that child to reach out to that item or items in the array of things in front of them that belong to the last Dalai Lama and say, "Mine," as babies do. And they'll say, well, that's a sign. They look for other signs as well. This Dalai Lama, China has said that they will choose the next Dalai Lama. This Dalai Lama has said, "I am the last." He has said, "When I die, I choose not to be reincarnated," because of what China is trying to do and politicize the work of the Dalai Lama. So, there's a picture of Tibet, which China says is just as they do as Taiwan, that they say it belongs to them. You'll see prayer flags sometimes. These prayer flags are connected to Buddhism. And you say, well, who do they pray to? Well, they're not really praying to anyone. They believe that when they pray, it just kind of helps them, and it's sending good vibes out into the atmosphere, into the world around you. The prayer flags, all the colors have meaning behind them. They put them up, and they say as the wind blows, then those positive thoughts are blown out all over creation to help them. You know, did Jesus tell us that we should cease our desires? No. What did Jesus tell us we need to do? What does Christianity tell us we do? We need to control. We need to what? Somebody said, huh? We keep praying, and we're praying so that we can replace those. Paul said we renew our minds. See, we don't eliminate our desires. We replace them with what is right. And so for Buddhists, it's a very pessimistic, it's a very negative system, and we have the opportunity to show them a different way. We need to tell them about Jesus. We need to talk to them about the compassion of Jesus. We need to show them in the Bible where Jesus cared for people, healed the sick, wanted good things for them, and how Jesus embraced the suffering in His life as part of life. Even though He didn't deserve it, He died for us. And so show that, teach that, show that good example in the sinless life of Jesus, and help people see that there is a better way. Thank you all. Be blessed and do good, and do it for the glory of God. See you next week.